Hey everyone, welcome. I am absolutely thrilled to share today's explainer with you because honestly, we are tackling a phenomenon that most people completely misunderstand. You know that feeling, right? Have you ever walked into a room and instantly felt this heavy, unmistakable tension in the air? Or maybe you immediately sensed that two people talking quietly in the corner were actually having a pretty intense argument, even though they were both smiling. Well, today, we are breaking down the absolute architecture of social intuition. We are moving way past the outdated idea of intuition as just some vague gut feeling. Instead, we're looking directly at it as a rapid, computable data set. We are going to look at the hard neurology and psychology of those fascinating people who can just instantly read the room. By the end of this, I promise you're going to look at every single social interaction through a completely different, highly analytical lens. So, let's get started. Picture this. You're at a loud, buzzing networking event. Or, maybe it's a chaotic family dinner party. There are 50 conversations happening at once. Plates clinking, people laughing, half the room is looking at their phones. It is an absolute whirlwind of sensory data. And yet, there is always that one person who walks in and just effortlessly navigates the chaos. They glide through the crowd like it's nothing. They know exactly who to approach, exactly what joke will land perfectly with a specific group, and they instinctively know how to swoop in and save a colleague from being trapped in the corner with the office overtalker. Ever wonder how some people instantly get it? It feels like they have some sort of built-in radar that the rest of us are simply missing, doesn't it? To really appreciate this superpower, let's look at the contrast here. On one side, we have the socially awkward. And look, we have absolutely all been there. We've all made the poorly timed joke that lands with a loud thud, or completely missed the incredibly obvious cue that the person we're talking to desperately needs to leave and run to their next meeting. We overthink our interactions and we end up a step behind. But on the other side, we have the room reader. They operate with this effortless grace. They build instant connection without breaking a sweat. And here is the secret. It's not that they have a magical gift while the rest of us are just stumbling around in the dark. It's that they are operating on a highly optimized mental algorithm. All right, so let's get right into part 1, deconstructing social intuition. Okay, let's dive into this. What exactly are we talking about here? Check out this specific definition of social intuition. It is the rapid, unconscious psychological process of decoding interpersonal dynamics and nonverbal cues. This is a computational process. The brain of a room reader is essentially a supercomputer, and it's constantly pulling in massive amounts of data: body language, spatial distance, facial expressions, and unconsciously running the numbers to produce a perfectly calibrated social response. And the reason this happens completely unconsciously is actually fascinating. You see, the brain relies on deeply ingrained heuristics, which are basically mental shortcuts to save cognitive energy. If we had to consciously calculate every single smile or crossed arm, our brains would literally overload. So it pushes this incredibly complex computation entirely to the background. And when we say rapid, I want to be extremely clear about what that metric actually means. Milliseconds. Just let that sink in for a second. Milliseconds. That is the dramatic, almost unbelievable speed at which a highly intuitive brain processes a room the absolute second they walk through a door. Literally, before they have even taken off their coat, their brain has already scanned the entire environment. In fact, neuroscience shows that the human amygdala can read a facial expression and trigger a threat or safety response in under 30 milliseconds. 30 milliseconds. That is long before the conscious thinking part of your brain even catches up. It happens so incredibly fast that it manifests as a physical feeling, which is exactly why we mistakenly call it a sixth sense. So how does the brain actually construct this complex analysis in mere milliseconds? Think of it like building an architectural framework from the ground up, happening in 3 distinct steps. Step 1, baseline observation. They instantly establish what normal looks like for the room, taking in the baseline volume and general physical spacing of everyone. Step 2, microexpression detection. They are catching those fleeting, involuntary facial twitches that reveal true emotion before a person's social mask goes back up. We're talking about tiny flashes of genuine emotion that lasts just 1/40th of a second. Step 3, contextual synthesis. This is where the whole puzzle comes together. They take those microexpressions and combine them with the environment. They know, for example, that a polite smile paired with stiff shoulders and feet pointed directly toward the door doesn't mean happiness. No, it means intense discomfort and a desperate desire to escape. Moving right along to part 2, the psychology in action at the office water cooler. Let's visualize how this works in a real, everyday setting. Imagine our intuitive person walking up to a group conversation at the office water cooler. They aren't just passively listening to the words being spoken. What they are actually doing involves a set of highly complex cognitive mechanisms firing all at the exact same time. First, rapid pattern recognition. They notice that John always looks at Sarah before he answers a question, which silently indicates she holds the real authority. Next, emotional intelligence mapping. This is where they map out the power dynamics of the circle by observing exactly who everyone's torso is unconsciously angled toward. Then, nonverbal cue extraction, noticing the tightly crossed arms or the subtle shifting of weight from one foot to another. And finally, environmental awareness, noticing who is standing closest to the exit or nervously checking their watch. What feels like totally effortless charm to the rest of the group is actually just the intuitive person's incredible simultaneous processing of these 4 distinct data points. Let's just pause here for a moment so we can really absorb this, because this is the real light bulb moment of today's explainer. And this brilliantly illustrates the core thesis of the research we are exploring today. Reading a room is not an innate, mysterious superpower. It is a highly evolved, structured cognitive skill. You aren't simply born with a magical gift, and you certainly aren't doomed if you typically feel a little awkward in groups. You just haven't trained your cognitive skill to automatically process the structure of the room yet. It's an architecture, it's a skill, and because it's a structural skill, that means absolutely anyone listening to this right now can actively build it for themselves. Now, think about how the cognitive processing load is divided here. How does the intuitive brain balance all these different streams of data without totally short-circuiting? Well, 40% of their processing power is dedicated purely to visual cues, the body language, the eye contact, the subtle leaning in or pulling away. Then, 35% is dedicated to vocal tones. Now, this isn't about what is being said, but exactly how it is being said. For example, they are detecting that slight elevation in vocal pitch that silently signals anxiety or defensiveness long before a single confrontational word is spoken. And the remaining 25% is dedicated to contextual history, processing what happened between these specific people yesterday or even last week. By seamlessly balancing the cognitive load across these 3 streams simultaneously, the intuitive person gets a complete, high-definition 3D picture of the room. Which brings us to part 3, mastering the architecture and applying it to your daily life. If you really want to become a room reader, you need to consciously understand and optimize your own intuition mix. And it breaks down like this. 50% of your effort needs to go into focused observation. That means you have to stop thinking about what clever thing you are going to say next and actually watch the people around you. 30% requires cognitive empathy. Now, this is a really crucial distinction. Cognitive empathy is fundamentally different from affective empathy. Affective empathy is feeling what someone else feels, taking on their sadness or joy. Cognitive empathy, however, is simply understanding how someone thinks and why they might be giving off a certain cue without getting emotionally hijacked by it yourself. It is pure data collection. And the final 20% is behavioral adaptation, taking that data and seamlessly adjusting your own approach, your tone, and your posture to perfectly match the frequency of the room. To make this completely actionable for you, here is your summary checklist. Seriously, I want you to actively try this tomorrow at work or the very next time you enter social space. First, establish a baseline upon entering. Take 10 conscious seconds just to observe the general mood, the volume, and the spacing before you say a single word. Second, watch for sudden microshifts. When a new person walks up to the group, does someone's posture suddenly stiffen? Does the eye contact dart away? Third, and honestly most importantly, pause and synthesize before reacting. I literally cannot stress the power of the pause enough. Give your brain those vital, conscious milliseconds to process the visual and vocal data before you speak. By doing this systematically, you are taking what seems like pure magic and transforming it into a highly practical, structured tool that you completely control. So we have deconstructed the mystery, and we've handed you the blueprints. Social intuition is not a ghost. It is a beautiful, intricate structure built on rapid observation, emotional mapping, and contextual synthesis. So I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought to take with you today. What does your architecture look like when you walk into a crowded room? The next time you cross the threshold, I challenge you to deploy this new psychological lens. You might just surprise yourself with how much you can instantly read. Thank you so much for joining me for today's explainer. Keep observing, keep synthesizing, and I'll see you next time.